Welcome to a Dante walkthrough in both English and Italian. This is a trial approach that I haven't come across in other podcasts or YouTube clips, where we will explore not just the meaning and content of the work, in this case the Commedia, but importantly, we'll try to gain a better appreciation of how Dante used the Tuscan dialect in a very creative and imaginative way. This is a dialect of some 750 years ago that's changed remarkably little, developed into what we now know as the modern Italian language. When you read English translations of the Commedia, and there are many fine ones, I'm left always with a sense of regret for those readers who cannot engage with the original language. It's in the poetry itself that the work comes alive. It's the fusion of how the words are written, along with what they are saying, that produces such a potent work. There are academies in all parts of the world that continue to this day to study Dante and his Commedia and other works. They turn out a regular stream of PhD students, places like Princeton, Oxford, Leeds, etc. There's also cases like the Tuscan farmer who's learnt the entire 14,233 lines of the Commedia and happily recites to himself while working in his tractor. It's a work that can touch anyone really. It's a big call to, as some say, that the Commedia represents the pinnacle of human literary achievement. But really, you'll have to decide for yourself. I hope that this approach helps you in that endeavour. We're starting with Canto 26, the famous Ulysses canto from the Inferno. We find ourselves in the 8th circle of hell, deep down, dealing with various types of fraud and fraudulent activity. There being so many, and unlike other circles in Dante's imagined Inferno that he creates in the writing, this particular circle has 10 subsections, what Dante calls malebolge, or bad pockets. It's a term that he coined himself. So we're here in the 8th bolgia, or crevasse or pocket, and its dealings particularly with fraudulent counsellors, consiglieri fraudolenti. In brief, Dante imagines for us what might have happened to Ulysses on his return home to Ithaca after the Trojan Wars and his many other wanderings. We'll discuss in a bit more detail at the conclusion of the walkthrough what we think this canto is really about and why it's captured the imagination of readers and particularly poets over a long period of time, particularly the Romantic poets of Victorian and later eras. For those not familiar with Dante's Commedia, it's comprised of 100 cantos, a word in Italian that literally means song. The 100 cantos are assembled into 3 sections: Inferno, or hell, Purgatorio, or purgatory, and the Paradiso, or paradise. These sections, or cantiche, canticles, have each 33 cantos, except the Inferno, which has 34, having what some people call an introductory canto as the first. Throughout all of the Inferno, and up to the end, nearly to the end of the Purgatorio, Dante is accompanied or guided by the shade or the spirit of Virgil, the Roman poet from the Emperor Augustus era. Virgil was the writer of the classic and quite long Latin epic poem, the Aeneid, describing the travels of Aeneas from the fall of Troy to his founding of Rome. It's fictional, naturally, but regarded as a classic work from that era. You'll come to appreciate, if you learn and read more of Dante's works, that he was clearly a very intelligent guy. He was very widely read in an era before the printing press, when all books were hand-copied and often very lovingly illustrated. In fact, one could imagine at the time the absolute shock if you came across a family with a dozen or so books in their home. My God, so many books. Dante starts writing the Inferno in the first decade of the 1300s and uses the approach of setting his action for the entire work in the Easter week of 1300. He is the writer of the poem, and he's the main character in it, the pilgrim, we might say, travelling through the 3 realms. By riding through a time shift, as it were, he can meet and talk to characters on his journey who may have since died or met with other dramas, etc. At the time the reader is first encountering the work, they're not aware of this. As for Virgil and his Aeneid, this was an absolute favourite of Dante's, and he would have known it intimately. It still puzzles people, and we'll touch on it again hopefully, as to why, in a medieval Christian and humanistic poetic journey, a journey of discovery that the Commedia is, Dante chooses a pagan poet as his mentor, his guide, his protector, and basically someone who becomes a true friend on this perilous and complex journey. As I mentioned, this canto has resonated with many people down through the centuries. For example, Primo Levi, the Italian writer and Holocaust survivor, devotes a full chapter in his novel Survival in Auschwitz, also called If This Were Man, where he really struggles to recall the text and explain it to a fellow half-starved inmate and co-worker in the concentration camp. Osip Mandelstam, the Russian poet, also writes a long piece on the Ulysses canto when in one of Stalin's gulags. But it's not all as it seems. After all, Dante does place Ulysses here in one of the lower regions of hell. So there must be two sides to this story, or maybe many sides. What do we take away from it ourselves? It is indeed an enigmatic and a mysterious episode. So we'll start our walkthrough, and I'll read in both English and Italian to try and point out how the language is playing its part. Recall that as a canto, it's really meant to be read and heard aloud, as it were, to appreciate the beauty of the sounds. I'll do my best to explain the references to mythology, philosophy, the Bible, etc., as they occur. And I'll have on the video version the texts of segments as we proceed. The English in these segments is my own translation of the Italian as best I can do it. I've not attempted to do anything particularly poetic in terms of styling or rhyming, etc. I'm not that smart, and it's nearly impossible in any case. Hence, it's just my best guess at how the Italian translates into English. Don't worry, if you know little Italian, you'll get the gist of it in any case. Right, so off we go. The canto starts unexpectedly with really what is a bitter invective against Florence for the first 12 lines of the canto. Godi Firenze, poiché sei si grande. Rejoice Florence, because you're so grand. Che per mare per terra batti l'ali. You beat your wings over sea and land. E per l'inferno tuo nome si spande. And here in hell your fame grows. This word gaudy is more than rejoice. It's really means, yeah, live it up, Florence. You really, you're so great. You beat your wings over sea and land. This is a reference, in a way, to a mural or a statuette that was on one of the buildings in Florence, one of the administrative buildings, and it had the image of an eagle, and it had the inscription in Latin, dedicating Florence to ruling over sea and land. So the building has since been destroyed, or it's no longer there. But the third line is the kicker. E per l'inferno tuo nome si spande. So he's saying, yes, Florence, you're so great, you beat your wings over sea and land. And here in hell, your fame grows. The previous canto to this one dealt with the thieves, and he now makes a reference to this. Tra i ladron trovai 5 cotari. I found 5 of your citizens, Florentines, amongst the thieves. Tui cittadini, onde mi vien vergogna, e tu in grandoranza non ne sale. You make me ashamed, and they don't hold you in such a high regard. The you being Florence, obviously, in this case. So they're not really a good advertisement for Florence, to supposedly make her so grand and, beat your wings over sea and land. You'll note the rhyming pattern that Dante uses, and he uses it throughout the Commedia. It's the first and third lines, as if you look at those first 6 lines, are rhyming, and the second rhymes with the 4th, the 5th with the 7th. So you have this sort of a plaited, chained effect, and it tends to give the work a bit of a rolling, moving forward feel to it by using this end of line rhymes. There are lots of rhymes and that occur within lines, and we'll point some of these out along the way. Ma se pressa al matin del ver si sogna. But if, as morning nears, we dream the truth, tu sentirai, di qua dal picciol tempo. You'll soon feel the wrath, the prato, too, to name just one, wishes for you. Tu sentirai, di qua dal picciol tempo, di quel che prato non caltri t'agogna. And one of the main themes that Dante wants to deal with throughout the Commedia is the effects, the after effects of all the internecine activities, the warfare, the hatred, the alliances, the battles, the communal discord that arises from the machinations of politics. The very fact that Dante's even writing the Commedia is a result of him being exiled from Florence as a result of political machinations and effectively being on the losing side of a particular nasty period in Florentine history. So he's very motivated to have a view on this and to express the fact that these things don't help the community at large. They don't help people in their life. The particular reference to Prato it's interpreted different ways, and it's not really worth going into. But really, the underlying theme here is factionalism and the hatred that causes. And he proceeds to say, if it were already come, it wouldn't be too soon. But bring it on, as it surely must come one day, as it will weigh on me more the older that I get. E se gia fosse non sarei per tempo, così fosse te che è pur essere dei, che più mi graverà con più tempo. That's a pretty tough terzino. These sections of 3 lines of Italian, the way the poem is subdivided, are called terzine. That one's quite a tough one, and the verbs, the end of line uses are really quite harsh. It's all part of, he's really spitting these 12 lines out, through his teeth. He's gritting them out. It's pure invective. But I like that last line, che più mi graverà con più tempo. Graverà meaning basically, it will hurt me or grieve me. Con più tempo. I don't know whether that's something. Dante invented a lot of words or threw existing words together in a different way that may not have existed, but when you hear them, you sort of intuitively understand what the word means. So tempo being time, tempo means my timing, basically the increase of time on me. So che più mi graverà con più tempo. It will really grieve me more the older that I get. Now there's a complete change of pace and tone. He's had his 12 lines of invective against Florence, and we're back to the action. Where were we in the journey? We're in the 8th bolgia of the 8th circle. Noi ci partimmo e su per le scale. We departed up by the stairs. Che n'ave fatti I burni a scendere pria. Rimontò il duco mio e trasse me. So we departed up by the stairs that had made us pale when we descended earlier. My leader, il duco, moved up and pulling me along. So this path they travel, this part of hell has been, that the landform's been disturbed, destroyed, and parts of it, it's very rocky and broken pieces of ground. It's not easy to get around. But the way the tone changes, it's nearly cinematic, and there's a lot of, when you read Dante, you can sense the same styles and approaches that people use in the cinema. I mean, after all, good cinema is good storytelling, and the way he writes throughout the poem, he's able to, use similar sorts of feel, the long shot, as it were, concentrate on a particular character, and you get this sense of, it is nearly cinematic. So we've had a complete change of pace. He's had he spat the dummy about Florence, and now he's back to where we were, and they're moving on. A nice line that Rimontò il duco mio e trasse me. So my leader led on and followed me or pulled me along. And now a terzina where the very words, the very sound of the words give you the sensation of what's going on. E proseguendo la solinga via, tra le schegge rocce del scoglio, lo pie senza la man non si spedia. So proceeding on our solitary way, proseguendo la solinga via, past the crags and rocky rocks of the outcrop, tra le schegge e tra rocce del scoglio, lo pie senza la man non si spedia. Feet, lo pie, without hands, senza la man non si spedia. We couldn't advance. Spedia, you think of it being expedite. So, la pie, the foot, sans, like French, senza la man non si spedia. But that second line is full of sharp S's and sounds. Tra le schegge, tra rocce del scoglio, to give you the sensation of the form of landscape they're moving past. It's they're having to bend down and really watch how they're going so as not to fall. He's now reached a point, and it's really the stopping to reflect, or Dante's reflecting. It pains me then, and again it grieves me, when I recall what it was I saw, and more than I'd usually want, I hold back my skills, my capabilities. Allora mi dolsi, e ora mi ridoglio. So I'm pained, and again I'm repained when I'm sitting here writing this, basically. Quando drizzo la mente a ciò che io vidi. Drizzo, when I straighten my mind to that which I see. È più l'ingenuo freno che io non soglio. Ingenuo being my ingenuity, a freno meaning to brake, still the word for brakes now in a car, I freni. So really he's saying, this thing that he sees, it pains him, and he wants to describe it, he wants to talk about it, but something is telling him that he needs to really take his skills in hand, be quite careful about what it is and how he describes. He doesn't want to, he doesn't want to ruin it for us, so he has to really think about how he's going to describe the scene. So already there's a subtle theme here about skills, capabilities. Dante wasn't ashamed of his capabilities, and he lets it known in the poem. He's not lacking in knowledge of his own capabilities. So there's this already creeping into the canto is this idea about capabilities, ingenuity, and how you maintain them, how you use them appropriately. So in talking about his skills, he's saying, in case they run on where virtue does not lead, so that if guiding star or something better has granted me the gifts, I don't abuse them. So it's as I was saying. So in Italian it says, perché non corra che virtù non guidi. So corra meaning run where virtue doesn't guide, che virtù non guidi. Sì che, se stella buona o miglior cosa, that's a nice line, m'ha dato il ben, has given me the goodness. So if a kind star or something better has given me the goodness, che io stessi, that I themselves, non li invidi, I don't ruin them, I don't abuse them. We now launch into, at line 25, a really quite complex simile. So we're at the stage where he's at this point, he's looking at something, he's very aware of his skills and how he should actually describe it, and he's going to go about trying to explain to us what it is that he's seeing. And Dante was a great user of the simile, probably one of the earliest people to use them to the extent and the subtlety. And he'll often pair up a complex version of a simile that might refer to mythology or the Bible with one that's much more down to earth, more common, that anybody, an illiterate, cook in the kitchen hearing it would understand what he's saying. And so he's starting this simile. It says, like a peasant resting on a hillside in that season when the sun least hides its face from us. That's a bit convoluted, but quante il villan cal poggio si riposa. Now the quante is really saying many, and it's going to refer to something well down about 9 or 10 lines further. Quantil villan being a peasant or really a worker in the field. Al poggio si riposa, leaning on the hillside. Nel tempo che colui che il mondo schiara la faccia sua a noi tien men ascosa. It's a really convoluted way of saying summer. It's basically saying nel tempo che colui, in the time when he, that the world, che il mondo schiara la faccia sua a noi tien men ascosa. The sun, la faccia sua, his face, to us, keeps least hidden. In other words, when is the sun least hidden to us? What time of the year? Well, it's in summer. And then a very down-to-earth line. Come la mosca cede la zanzara. When the fly gives way to the mosquito. So really in that hour when the fly gives way to the mosquito. And when is that hour? Well, it's obviously at the end of the day, when day's turning to night. So we're in the middle of summer. It's right at the end of the day. You can just imagine a hot, hazy afternoon. The peasant's leaning on the hillside, resting after a hard day's work, looking down in the valley. So what does he see? Vede lucciole giù per le vallee. He sees fireflies down in the valley. Forse colà dove vendemmiara, maybe where he, worked, gathered grapes, ploughs, etc. Di tante fiamma tutta risplendea. Of so many flames, the eighth crevasse was alive. I'll read it again. Di tante fiamma tutte risplendea, l'ottava boggia, si come io m'accorsi, tosto che fui là ve il fondo parea. It's he's looking down. The eighth crevasse was alive with so many flames. This is what the peasant's seeing. He's seeing fireflies, but Dante is now telling us the reality that he's looking down into the eighth bolgia, the eighth crevasse, and he's seeing thousands and thousands of flames, and it was clear to him once he could position himself and see right to the bottom of this valley. So the bolgia are not meant to be imagined as being, they can be any size. This is an imagined area, and here he's trying to give us the idea that this is a massive area, and that line that really comes alive. It's di tante fiamme tutte risplendea l'ottava bolgia. It flows from the end of line 31 to 32. It just flows nicely, trying to explain what it is in reality that Dante and Virgil are looking at. So he's described the general scene, and he's used the comparison of a peasant seeing fireflies. Now we move in for the close-up, just like the cinematic photographer, because he now wants to explain what a bit more about the flames, and he is going to use a couple of complex similes here. This particular one that's mentioned in the next two tercines from lines 34 to 39 comes from the Bible. So it comes from the second book of Kings in the Old Testament. We've got the prophet Elijah, who's aging and who is being followed by a younger person, Elisha, who has been told by the Lord somehow that his task is to follow Elijah until such time as Elijah passes away, and he will inherit the mantle, the cloak of Elijah, and become the Lord's prophet. So Elisha has been following Elijah for 7 or more years, and at some point in the journey, the scene occurs, and it's described in the Bible, where Elijah is swept up to heaven by a flaming chariot comes along. Grabs Elijah, whooshes him straight up to heaven. His cloak gently falls, and Elisha inherits the mantle and becomes the prophet of the Lord. And Dante uses an incredibly beautiful description of this event to try and explain, just to give an idea of what these flames look like. He uses the idea that they look like the flame of the chariot zooming up to heaven that Elisha just barely caught a glimpse of, when this thing happened in an instant or, very, very quickly. E quale colui che si vengiò con l'orsi, and just as he who avenged himself with the bears, we'll explain that a bit later, but he's basically referring to Elisha. Vidi il carro di Elia a dipartir, quando I cavalli al cielo erti levorsi. Saw Elijah's chariot swept away when the horses reared and raised it up to heaven. Che non potea si con gli occhi seguire, he could barely follow it with his eyes. Che al vedersi altro che le fiamme sola, si come nuvolette in su salire, that he saw only a flame like a little cloud, ascending ever upwards. Personally, I really like these two terzine. Some of the lines are just great. That number 36, quando I cavalli al cielo erti levorsi, just has a real flow to it. When the horses reared up and took it to heaven. And then you've got line 38 to 39. Che vedesse altro che le fiamme sole, si come nuvoletto in su salire. All those S's, and the nuvoletta is a nice touch. So basically, it's all he could see was a little flame, just that flame, like a little cloud in su salire, in upwards riding or climbing. So now that tricky opening line about the che si vengò con l'orsi, the one who avenged himself with the bears. So the story of Elisha, having received the mantle of the Lord, becomes a prophet, travelling from town to town, spreading the Lord. So the story goes, he came to a town, a village, where there were some young children, band of children, who started mocking him because Elisha was bald. He was, bald as they go, and the kids started making fun of him and laughing. So Elisha caused to come out of the nearby forest a number of female bears that killed the children. This is Old Testament so it's pretty horrendous. So, but in reality, we assume it's more of a metaphor. So whoever took the Lord's name or the bringer of the Lord's message to task or made fun of them or hurt them in any way would be punished by the Lord. So we're assuming that a whole bunch of the kids didn't get eaten by bears, but that's the way the Old Testament goes. So that very opening line, it would have meant something to someone who was familiar with the Bible. So when they read line 34, e quale colui che si vengiò con l'orsi, and just as the one who avenged himself with bears would have known what we were talking about here and who the character was. So he's described that these flames that we've seen, the Bolger, reminded him, it looked like Elijah's chariot zooming up to heaven. And he says, tal si muove ciascun per la gola del fosso. In this way, thus, these flames moved along the throat of the gully. Che nessun mosse il furto e ogni fiamma un peccatore in vola. That the flames that moved along the throat of the gully, the occupants not being visible, but we know that within each flame a sinner was encased. Some lovely lines there. E ogni fiamma un peccatore in vola. Ogni fiamma, flame, or peccatore, sinner, in vola, involved like enveloped. If you go back to that line 40 to 41, you'll see a technique that Dante uses. Benigni calls it the jambomane, or I don't know if that's the correct term, where the line flows into the second line. So it says, tal si muove ciascun per la gola. Thus they move each one along the throat del fosso. So it's like crossing your legs. It just creates a continuity. It sort of pushes you into the next line. Tal si muove ciascun per la gola del fosso. The same way, and thus these flames moved along the throat of the gully. From the description so far, personally, I sense the flames that are each containing a sinner to be like, really like a corn cob. They look like an ear of corn, but you know, red hot, bright fire, where you can just sense somebody within the flames. But each one looks figuratively like a cob of corn, but it's a living flame. And we move now from what I'm seeing, what Dante and Virgil are seeing in that description, to what I'm feeling, what Dante's feeling, and it's quite tense and worried. I stood on the bridge, straining to see. Io stavo sopra il ponto e veder surto, sì che se io non avessi un ronchion preso, caduto sarei già senza essere urto. I stood on the bridge, straining to the sea, that if I'd not grabbed hold of an outcrop, se io non avessi un ronchion preso, I'd have easily fallen without the slightest nudge. Caduto sarei già senza essere urto like urged. So caduto, I would have fallen, sarei, I would have, senza essere urto, without being urged, without having been pushed. So if he had not, se non avessi un ronchion preso, if I had not grabbed an outcrop, that's what would have happened. We move on. Virgil, il duca che mi vede tanto atteso, my leader seeing me so stressed. Virgil can sense that Dante's, something's really got him about this scene. Tanto atteso, disse, says. And Virgil just says, dentro dei fuochi son gli spiriti. Within those flames are souls, or are spirits. Each is wrapped in the very flame they bred. So, dentro dei fuochi son gli spiriti. Ratun si fascia di quel che egli è inceso. It's a bit of a complex line, that one. Ratun si fascia, each is fashioned. Di quel of which che egli è inceso, of that which it was made. So it's as if the flame itself is the result of what the inhabitant within the flame has created, has brought to be. And Dante replies, O master, I replied, hearing you makes me more certain, as I thought as much, but I wanted to ask you. So in Italian, maestro mio, my master, risposi io, I answered, per udirti, to have heard you, udire, son io più certo, I'm more certain, ma già m'avviso che così fosse, e già volevo dirti, e già m'avviso, so it was already, that it was already like this, che così fosse, but I wanted to ask you. So we're now progressing from long shot to a general view of the flames, right down to one particular flame. So we've got that same cinematic effect zooming in. Who is it in that fire that's divided at the top, that it looks so like the flames that arise from the pyre where Eteocle and his brother were laid? And this is again a complex simile. So in Italian, chi è in quel fuoco che vien si diviso? Who's in that fire that comes so divided, di sopra, from the top? Che parasurge della pira, that seems to surge from the pyre, dove Teocle con fratel fu miso, where Eteocle col fratel, with his brother, was placed. So again, if you knew anything of Greek mythology, this one, the words Eteocle and the brother would immediately bring the story to mind. I'll do my best. It's a complex one. So Eteocle and Polynice were two brothers. They were the children of Oedipus, who married, or they're the children out of the union between Oedipus and Jocasta, who was the mother. So they're sort of the result of this, what some might consider this horrendous union. And on the departure of Oedipus, the two brothers hated each other from birth, whether that's a result of where they've come from, and they reluctantly agree that they will rule Thebes alternately year after year. So Eteocle takes, I think it's Eteocle takes the first year, Polynice goes his own way, but it's an arrangement that's never going to work. And eventually Polynice, the other brother, raises an army and comes back, mighty battle, and both brothers, it's said, in battle, kill each other at the same instant, swords through the whatever, and in their death they're placed upon the funeral pyre, and the flames are lit, the fire is lit, and the very flames that arise from the pyre divide into two. So they so hated each other in life that even in death, upon the pyre, their flames couldn't intermingle. They each went forked their own separate way. So Dante uses this story to give you an impression of this particular flame that he's looking at, which has got the flames at the very top of the ear, the top of the structure, are splitting into two, and it's a very elegant simile to use. Now Virgil starts to take a bit more of a lead role in the canto, and he replies, "In there suffer or reside Ulysses and Diomedes, travelling together in his revenge, the Lord's revenge, as they once earned his wrath. Risposio a me, là dentro si martira Ulysses e Diomede, e così insieme alla vendetta vanno come a lira." A little bit complex, but là dentro si martira. Martira is like matures, or like a wine would mature. To me, that's what it says. And we have the two names here, Ulysses and Diomedes. Again, if you know your Odyssey, they'll mean something to you. And together they go in that wrath that they earned from the things that they did. But wait, there's more. And from within their flame they mourn the trickery of the horse that also opened the door for that noble seed to found Rome. So if you know the story of the fall of Troy, we know the Greek horse, the fake horse, in which Ulysses and others were hidden and was taken into the city gates, and from which ensued the destruction of Troy. But it's from the destruction of Troy that Aeneas escapes with his father and wife, etc., and he eventually, through his many travels, ends up founding the city of Rome. And he's referred to here as il gentil seme, line 60, the noble seed that founded Rome. E dentro da loro fiam si gema il guato del cavallo, and from within that flame grows the trickery, the trickery of the horse, che fe la porta, the door, as well as comes the founding of Rome, or from that gentle seed that brings about the founding of Rome. And in the next three lines, from line 61 to 63, Dante manages to pack in quite a few references to stories people may have known to give an idea of who these two characters were. These are I suppose the two sneaky guys that help bring about the destruction of Troy. Not really through noble means. And he starts off by saying, "They mourn therein their cunning, by which Diomede, though dead, still mourns Achilles, and they bear still the guilt of stealing the palla, the palladium." So wrapped up in that three lines is the story of Achilles. So now Achilles, if you go to your Wikipedia, you'll be able to read more on this, but Achilles is on the island of Skyros with his wife Diomede. She's pregnant. Achilles disguised as a girl. The king, like Amedes, doesn't want Achilles involved in any of the machinations that are going on. Ulysses arrives at the island. He's disguised as a peddler, selling women's clothes and jewellery. And amongst his wares, he places a spear and a shield. And when Achilles sees this, he instantly takes up the spear, and that's it. He's sprung. So Ulysses confronts him and eventually convinces him to join him on the expedition to Troy. And we know the outcome, that Achilles dies on Troy, and Diomede, pregnant and broken-hearted, dies of grief at the news of Achilles' death. So line 62, we've got Diomede ancora si duol d'Achille. So Diomedes still mourns Achilles. And then we've got Edel Palladio Penna Visi Porta, and this refers to the Palla, the Palla of Athena, the Palladium, which was a wooden statue that had somehow descended to Troy from Diana, and being such that the city would always be protected whilst ever the Palla, the Palladium, the statue, was within the city. And we know from the Odyssey that both Ulysses and his sidekick Diomede sneak in disguised as mendicants, as poor folk, and steal away the Palla. So in so doing, in a way, take away the protection, the divine protection for the city of Troy. But again, done in a deceitful manner, not done with an open face or in any chivalrous manner, but done by deception. And Dante speaks now, and he says, "Oh, if they can speak from within those flames," I said, "Master, I beg you, and beg you again 1,000 times over." So he's really quite intent. "Se posson dentro di quel faville parlar," if they can from within that flame speak, "dissi io," I said, "Maestro, assai ten priego, e ripriego, che le priega vale mille." You can obviously see the sort of alliteration there. "Maestro, assai ten priego," "Oh, Master, I pray you," "e ripriego," and I repray, "che il preghiero," that the prayer, "valga mille," that the prayer is worth 1,000. "Che non mi facci d'attendere niego," please don't let me stay here unfulfilled. "Fin che la fiamma cornuta qui vegna, vedi che del desio ver lei mi piego." So it's basically saying, please, I beg you 1,000 times over, that when that forked flame comes near, you can see how much I truly want it. If you look at the Italian, it's like it finishes at line 69 with the word piego, that when "vedi che il desio ver lei mi piego," see that through desire I fold myself to you. But the piego has a nice ring with the previous Tessina, where he's using priego, praying, where he's basically saying praying as an action, and also la preghiera vale mille. He uses also in line 68, la fiamma cornuta, the forked flame, qui vegna, that comes near us. And before that, che non mi facci dell'attendere niego, don't let me wait unfulfilled. So really those two Tessinas flow into each other. It's from line 66 to 67, so you really need to read from 64 to 69 as one. Well, it's one speech that Dante's making, and it's full of anxiety and anxiousness. That he's asking that we he wants to interact with the flame, and in a fairly controlled way. Virgil says, and he to me, "Your prayer deserves much praise, and I agree, but hold your tongue." He's saying, so, "Eliame, la tua preghiera," and here we've got that word. So we've had that word praying, preghiera, quite a few times. "E degna da molto lodo" is quite worth it. "Io però lo accetto," and I accept it. "Ma faccia che tua lingua si sostegna," but make your tongue sustained. In other words, hold back your tongue. In other words, Virgil wants to do the talking here, and he's saying to Dante, "I understand you, that's fine, let me do the talking." "Lascia parlare a me." So he says very specifically, let me speak. "Ciò ch'io concetto, ciò che tu vuoi, che sarebbe schivi, perché è for greci forse del tuo detto." It's a little bit difficult, but lascia parlare a me, let me talk, because ch'io concetto ciò che tu vuoi, I can conceive what it is you want. Che that they, sarebbe schivi, that they would be disgusted, really disgusted. Perché for greci, because they're Greeks. and they would be forse del tuo detto. So they're going to be disgusted. Che sarebbe schivi forse del tuo detto. So these being Greeks, they're not going to countenance someone like Dante speaking in some horrendous language like Tuscan or one of the Italian dialects. They're proudly Greek and need to be addressed that way. So Virgil, that's his reasoning here. It's only that he wants to be able to communicate and get their attention. And speaking anything other than Greek, they would just regard as being nothing, just, absolute garbage. So now as comment, when the flame had come towards us, poi che la fiamma fu venuto quivi, and my master thought it was the right moment, I heard him speak in this manner. Fu venuto quivi, dove pareva il duco mio tempo e loco. In questa forma lui parlava udivi. So in questa forma, in this way, he parlava udivi. He spoke udivi and I heard. So we now get the speech that Virgil makes to the flame containing Ulysses, and it's really Ulysses he's talking to. And it's really a classical poet from that era, not too removed from Homer, talking to one of Homer's characters. So it's a gracious and polite speech request. Are you who are two within one flame? If I earned your merit when I was alive, if I earned your merit to any degree, o voi che siete due dentro un fuoco, or you who are two in one flame, se io meritai di voi mentre ch'io vissi, se io meritai di voi assai o poco. That's a nice couple of lines. Se io meritai di voi mentre ch'io vissi, if I merited from you whilst I was alive, se io meritai di voi assai o poco, if I merited from you a lot or a little. Quando nel mondo l'alti versi scrissi, so scrissi rhyming with vissi, when in the world I wrote high verses or famous verses. Non vi movete, don't move. Ma l'un di voi, he's really addressing just one, l'un di voi, but one of you. So when alive I write my famous verses, please don't move on, but let one of you tell. Dove per lui perduto a morir gissi. It's a nice terzina, that one, starting with quando nel mondo gli alti versi scrissi, when I in the world wrote my high verses, non vi movete, ma l'un di voi dica, dove per lui perduto a morire gissi. So he's saying, don't move on, but let the one of you tell where, when lost, he met his death. So is it the lost physically, or lost in his life, or in sin, or whatever? We're yet to find out. That's really the first half of the canto, because now we really flip to the second part, where it begins with Lo maggior corno della fiamma antica, line 85. It's often people in reciting this canto, or they'll only do the second half sometimes, and again, it's a line that's probably very well known in Italian. It's a beautifully descriptive piece that tries to describe that the flame is now, it's stopped and it's quivering, and it's about to speak. And it says Lo maggior corno della fiamma antica, la maggior corno being the higher peak of the ancient flame. So there's two forks in the flame, one's representing Ulysses and the other one Diomedes. Cominciò a crollarsi mormorando, pur com quello cui vento a fatica. So it starts to tremble, crollarsi, mormorando, murmuring, pur com quella cui vento a fatica, like a flame that the wind plays with or worries. So I've said spluttering. So it's a nice description. It's got a very sonorous sound to it, that terzina. Inde la cima quae la menando. So the cima, the fork of the flame, the top, indi, moving, qua e là menando, here and there, meandering side to side. Come fosse la lingua che parlasse, just like a tongue would speak. Gitto voce di fuori e disse, throws a voice outside and says, quando, just that one word, because we then get the jump to the rest of the speech, 91. So we move from one terzina to the next, so that the split, Dante leaves that word quando hanging at the end of line 90. Indi la cima quae laminando, come fosse la lingua che parlasse. So the flame flickering backwards and forwards, just like a tongue would speak. Gittò voce di fuori e disse quando mi dipartì da Circe. So it throws its voice, it brings forth a voice that says, when I left Circe. So again, the reference to Homer, Ulysses and his men trapped by the enchantress, sorceress Circe, at least his men turned into pigs, and Ulysses was there for a year before he departed, and this refers to that. I left Circe, it was when I left Circe, who'd kept me entranced there for near Gaeta, well before Aeneas renamed it. A bit of a fictitious personage referring to another fictitious personage for more than a year. Quando mi dipartì da Circe, che sottrasse kept me captive or entranced. Mi più d'un anno là presso a Gaeta, there beside or near Gaeta, primo che si Aenea la nomasse, before Aenea la nomasse, renamed it. And here we really start to get into the guts of the canto, the really where Ulysses starts to describe the period from when he leaves Circe and goes or doesn't go to Ithaca. Né dolcezza di figlio, né la pietà del vecchio padre, nel debito d'amore, di qual doveva Penelope far lieta. So here neither the affection for my son, né dolcezza di figlio, né la pietà del vecchio padre, nor pity for my aging father, nel debito amor, the loving debt, nor the loving debt that would have made Penelope so happy, che qual dove Penelope a far lieta. Vincere poter dentro a me l'ardor. None of these things could overcome, could defeat the ardour, the desire within me, che io ebbi, that I had, a divenire del mondo esperto, to become of the world an expert, e delle vizi umani e del valor, of the vices of men and of their valour. So none of these things could overcome in here this absolute burning desire to become more knowledgeable of the world, of its vices, of the humanity's vices, and of its worth. Ma misi me per malto mare aperto. Benigni really, in his talks, emphasises the me, ma misi me per alto mare aperto. It's a lovely line, that. But I placed myself on the high seas open, per l'alto mare aperto, sol con un legno e con quella compagna picciola. Only with un legno. Legno simply means wood, but here it means just a simple vessel. Sol con un legno e con quella compagna, and with that company, piccola, with that small company, dalla qual non fui deserto, of which I had not been deserted. In other words, the men who remained true to him. So, ma misi me per l'alto mare aperto, I placed myself out into the wide open seas, just with a single vessel, and with that small group of men who'd remained true to me. From one shore to the next, seeing Spain, Morocco, and the Isle of Sardinia, and the many other places that our sea touches. Again, it's a lovely terzina. This d'un lito all'altro, vidi fin la Spagna, from un lito, from one coast or place where the sea touches land to the other, seeing finally Spain, fin nel Morocco, e l'isola di Sardi, Morocco and the island of Sardinia, i Sardi, e l'alti che quel mare intorno bagna. That's a nice final line on that terzina, and the others that sea around wets. Io e compagni eravamo vecchi e tardi. So they've travelled to these places, and it's now a bit of a break where they've reached a point, and he says, Io e compagni eravamo vecchi e tardi. My shipmates and I had grown old and slow. Tardi actually means late, so vecchia and late, but really meaning aged and slow. These are a bunch of old guys. Quando venimmo a quella foce stretta dove Ercole segna I suoi riguardi. When we reached the place, the narrow strait, quella foca stretta dove Ercole, where Hercules segno signs off on le sue riguardi, signs off or marks off the limits. So they've reached the point. They've reached basically the straits of the Mediterranean between Gibraltar and Africa. A ciò che l'uomo più oltre non si metta. So this is an important line that jumps to the next Teresina 109. So we've reached the Straits of Hercules, where man should not place himself. Interestingly, if you look at even the current flag of Spain, it's got the motto, it shows the two columns of Hercules signifying this place, and it's got the words plus ultra, which the original Latin was non plus ultra, no further beyond, meaning exactly this, that man should not go beyond this place. And it was, I think, King Philip or one of those kings of Spain in the 14 or 1500s that actually changed it to plus ultra, meaning further beyond, in a way saying this was during Spain's incredible expansionist exploratory era, probably the wealthiest country of the globe at that time, and effectively saying we go beyond, rather than the non plus ultra, no further beyond. So really Dante here in the 1300s is referring to what people regarded as or what was, mythically regarded from the story of Hercules, that this was the limits of man's knowledge, that it was not meant for him to go beyond this to the Atlantic, or what we now know as the Atlantic. The Teresina continues and says, "Dalla man destra mi lasciai Sibiglia," on the right hand lay Seville in Spain. Dall'altra gia m'ave lasciata Sieta. On the other hand lay Ceuta, which is still there in northern Africa. And then begins Ulysses' speech to his men, where, now, is this the fraudulent council? We'll have to discuss that later. But this is his talk to his men at this point, where they've reached the limits where man should proceed no further. But remembering that Ulysses has already said that nothing, not the love of his child or his father, or the debt of love he owed to his wife, could really prevent this burning desire he had to become more knowledgeable of the world of mankind. "O frate dissi, O brothers," I said, "you've come through 100,000 dangers to now face the west, che per 100.000 perigli siete giunti all'Occidente, and of this little vigil that's left to us of our remaining senses. This is a questo tanto piccolo vigilia i nostri sensi che del rimanente." So we run two Teresinas, end of one at 114, then to 115, beginning of the next. We've got two really beautiful lines, and he's saying, at this little vigil that's left to us of the senses that remain, that's what you get, the sense of impending. It's nearly as though, old age is taking away what little amount of senses we have. We're slipping into dementia nearly. So he says, "Non vogliate negare l'esperienza." You wouldn't want to deny yourself the experience. Diretto al sol, the experience of what's beyond the sunset. Diretto al sol, behind where the sun drops. Del mondo senza gente, the world without people. So this was obviously known as a place where people didn't know about it. The famous Teresina, "Considerate la vostra semenza." Consider your seeding, really. Consider how you were conceived. "Considerate la vostra semenza, fatti non fosti a vivere come bruti." You weren't made to live like brutes, like beasts, ma per seguire virtute e conoscenza, but to follow and to seek out virtue and knowledge. The conoscenza has the A instead of conoscenza, it just gives it a bit more power. That's quite a strong speech, and he goes on to assess it, and gives a self-assessment of it in the next Teresina. "Le miei compagni fec'io sì aguti." I roused my men so strongly, con questa piccola con questa orazione piccola al cammino, che apen posho li avrei ritenuti. So, he thinks he's done a pretty good job here. I arouse my men so strongly. But with this little speech on the cuff, al cammino, on the walk, che appena posho li avrei ritenuti, that I'd barely have been able to hold them back. Ma volta nostra poppa nel mattino, but we turned our poppa, the rear of the boat, al mattino, to the morning, which is the east. So in other words, they faced their boat to the west. And the famous line, dei remi facemo agli al folle volo. We turned our oars, I remi facemo, we made them, ali, wings, al folle volo, to our crazy flight, to this insane voyage. Sempre acquistando dal lato mancino, always veering to the left hand. In other words, they came out of the straits and effectively turned to the left, to the southwestward from where you come out of the entry to the Mediterranean. But that line is so powerful. Dei remi facemo ali al folle volo. We made our oars wings in our crazy flight. So he feels there's this constant repetition in various places where Ulysses used the words piccola, small, like, oh, it's a mere bagatelle. You can just hear people talk that way, who know they've done more with their talking than is apparent. They know it, but they sort of downplay it, and he exhibits this exact characteristic. So they've set off on their way. All the stars of the other pole we saw at night, while those from our native home didn't rise above the ocean floor. Tutte le stelle già dell'altro polo, the other pole, the northern pole, vede la notte, e le nostre tanto basso, che non surgea fuori del marizzuolo. Took me a long time to understand that. I think I sort of understand it, but che non surgea, that they didn't force themselves up from the marizzuolo, the base of the sea. Then 5 times did the light of moon rise and fall. 5 volte racceso e tanto casso la luna era di sotto della luna. So 5 times racceso, or relit, e tanto casso la luna era. And so basically the moonlight, he saw 5 moons rise and fall. Poi che eravamo nell'alto passo, that they were upon the high. He said he was going on the high open seas, and this is where they were. As we're approaching the finality, quando n'appareva una montagna bruna per la distanza, when in the distance we saw a mountain dark, una montagna bruna per la distanza, dark in the distance. E parvemi alta tanto quanto veduta non avea alcuna, and it seemed to me higher than any other that I'd seen. It's a nice run of words in that. Parvemi alta tanto quanto veduta non avea alcuna. Oh, we rejoiced, noi ci allegremmo, but that soon turned to crying and grief. E tosto torna in pianto, che della nuova terra un turbo nacque, because from that new land a turbo, a whirlwind, sea swirl was born. E percosse del legno il primo canto, and struck our ship head on. 3 times it swirled the ship and all its waters. 3 volte il fa girar con tutte l'acque, and on the 4th reared up the stern. Alla 4 levar la poppa in suso, la poppa, the poop, the rear, in suso, in upwards. E la proia era in giù, and the prow was downwards, come altrui piacque, like another would wish, as pleased another. Infin che il mar fu sovra noi richiuso, until the sea above us closed over. It's a very quiet, it's got a finality about it, that ending. Infin che il mar fu sovra noi richiuso. It's the image you have. You can think of something like the Titanic finally slipping down into the dark depths of the sea, and then the sea just goes back to its normal shape. There's no sign, and it's got that feeling about it, that last line. So, there ends the canto. Just as a matter of interest, the and we can analyse and talk about various things in the canto for ages, and people have and written heaps and heaps on it. But that the mountain that they see in the distance is Mount Purgatory and El Purgatorio, and they're approaching it in a way, that it's not to be approached because they haven't earned their right to be there. It's if we draw a line through the globe from where Dante's created or envisaged hell is, centered upon Jerusalem, it pops out somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, which is where the fictitious Mount Purgatory is. But interestingly, when we get to the Purgatorio, and I've just sort of been thinking about it, Dante actually opens the Purgatorio with the exact same analogy of a ship voyage. And I won't include the text in the video, but it says, "To run its course through smoother waters, the small bark of my wit now hoists its sail, leaving that cruel sea behind." Cruel sea being Inferno. Beautiful line. It's beautiful in Italian. "Percorrere miglior acque alze le vele." To run more easily the waters, alze le vele, raise the sails. "Ormai la navicella del mio ingegno." The little ship of my ingegno, of my wit. So we've got this concept right at the beginning of Purgatorio that reflects back to this canto about capability, about so he's going to approach Purgatorio with a clear heart and a clear mind as he and Virgil are in the boat approaching the shore, which is fair enough. And he leaves behind quel mar, lascia dietro a se mare si crudele, and leaves behind such a cruel, cruel sea. There are lots of these linkages that exist across the Cantiche. There are many readings of the canto in Italian that you can find on YouTube. You only need to look various styles of how it's read. It certainly, now that you've been through the walkthrough, it may touch you better. I certainly recommend it. Recommend listening to a few. I find it's a canto I can listen to in Italian any number of times, and I never tire of it. It's got a real beauty about it. As to what it all means, well, let's have a think about that. Well, I guess you'd have to say, as with Dante's treatment of Brunetta Latini in Canto 15, that Ulysses comes off pretty well out of this, or seemingly. It's supposed to be about I consiglieri fraudolenti, the fraudulent counsellors, those who with their own ingenuity and their intelligence seek to deceive others and gain an advantage of some sort. But you can't help having a sense of regard or feel for Ulysses, that he wanted to push the limits, and he's tried and suffered the consequences. But I think there are deeper messages. I think Dante is really saying that skills and ingenuity need to be tempered with some sort of a moral guidance, and we can see it much more so now than he would have ever seen it. We've got things like, genetic engineering and cyber activities, and you think back to the development of atomic weaponry, and you think, well, would those scientists, and people like Einstein would, must be aghast at what their discoveries, yielded. Whether they intended that or not, we don't know. Obviously, they probably did not intend that in many cases, but it's got this underlying feeling about, and Dante reflects it in his own capabilities in that passage where, looking into the Bolgia, he senses, I know I'm very skilled, I'm a great storyteller, but even I have to break and restrain my capabilities so that I do this right. And I think, to me, that's the overriding sensation that comes out of the canto, that it's about tempering and drawing a line between new discoveries, using capabilities, and how that balances with the morality of doing that. And frankly, for Ulysses, while I might admire him, and lots of people would, he really does, he sells his shipmates a pretty bad deal. He spins a yarn, and I think the clues are there in the words that Dante uses. I mentioned the pitula. If you count up the number of times, even very early in the canto, it's used in line 8, the pitula tempo. It just leaves you with this nagging doubt that Ulysses certainly knows what he's about, and we get the rundown of the things that he's done in the past. The false, the wooden horse and the Palladio and all that, and he really does con his seamen. And okay, these guys are old and tired and old, but they're still fellow human beings. He doesn't do the right thing by his family, so he's completely consumed with his desire to venire del mondo esperto, to become of the world an expert, to learn more. And it's laudable to learn more, but at what cost? And I think these are the things that roll around in your mind when you think about this canto, and there are lines, quite honestly, that come to my mind and roll around like I always use the expression like it's like sucking on a lolly at times. They just hang around there. I think this is part of the beauty of Dante, that he can fashion the language so well that that it's so appealing and so easy to remember passages. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough. I'm posting it shortly in a video version with the text, etc., as I explained. And depending on sort of the take up or popularity, I may do others, but they won't, I don't think, be as long as this one. So all the best, and thanks for listening. Bye. This podcast and videocast produced by Greg Naimo in September, early September 2017 in Sydney, Australia. Please refer any queries, etc., to myself. And you can contact me through the YouTube handle, etc. Thanks again. Bye.